She handed over an ID card that looked like it belonged in a museum exhibit, not a high-security government facility. The laminate was peeling at the corners, the edges soft and fuzzy from decades of being pulled in and out of wallets. The security guard, a young man who looked like he had barely started shaving, actually laughed. He held it up to the light, turning to his partner with a smirk that said everything about how little he understood the world he was standing in. "Check this out," he chuckled. "Looks like this thing expired before I was even born." He waved it under the high-tech scanner, not because he thought it would work, but just to watch it fail. He wanted the satisfying buzz of rejection. He wanted the red light. But he didn't get the red light. Instead, the screen lit up with a gold emblem they had never seen before, a symbol that wasn't in their training manuals. And then, a sound cut through the lobby. Not a buzz, but a siren. An alarm started going off, vibrating through the floorboards, locking down doors 3 floors up. Suddenly, nobody was laughing anymore. Because that wasn't just an old ID card. It was a key to a door that wasn't supposed to exist. You want to know what happened when they realized who they just mocked? You want to know what happens when the underestimated walk among us? Hit that subscribe button and let me tell you a story about respect, silence, and the kind of power that doesn't need to shout. Let's begin. The morning air outside the Veterans Affairs Medical Campus still held that crisp, deceptive bite of early autumn. It was that specific time of year when the morning demands a jacket, but you know by noon the heat will coiling up from the asphalt like a physical weight. The parking lot was mostly empty, a vast expanse of gray concrete marked with white lines. There were a handful of sedans scattered near the employee entrance, and a lone, battered maintenance truck backed into a yellow-striped space near the loading dock. The automatic glass doors of the main entrance breathed open with a tired mechanical sigh. Through them stepped Avery Cross. She was 54 years old. She wore a civilian windbreaker zipped halfway up over a plain white t-shirt. Her boots were sturdy, black leather, the kind that had seen better years but still held a mirror-like polish on the toes. Faded jeans hugged her legs, showing wear patterns that spoke of hard work, kneeling in dirt, and long hours, not high fashion. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, except for a thin, vintage gold watch that caught the fluorescent overhead light as she moved. Her hair, the color of spun silver, was braided tight and low down her back. It wasn't a style chosen for vanity. It was the kind of discipline that becomes second nature after decades of practice. It was the hair of someone who didn't want things getting in her way. As she walked toward the reception desk, there was a subtle limp in her gait. It didn't slow it down. It just gave her stride a measured, rhythmic cadence. It was the walk of someone who had learned to work around old injuries without letting them define her. In her right hand, she held a worn leather wallet. In her left, she clutched a canvas folder marked only with faint, smudged initials that might have once meant something to someone who knew how to read them. The main reception area felt larger than it needed to be. It was all polished floors and beige walls, an architecture designed to move people efficiently through government processes, not to make them feel at home. A tiny radio near the check-in desk played classic country music at a volume low enough that nobody was really listening, but loud enough to make the silence feel less institutional. 2 young security personnel leaned against the scanner station. They looked like they had been there since before dawn and had several more hours to kill before their shift ended. The one manning the ID scanner was Private Mendoza. He was maybe 22, with the soft edges of someone who had never deployed beyond the wire. He was bored, posture slouched, eyes glazed over. His partner, PFC Kinley, had one boot kicked up against the counter while he nursed a cup of lukewarm coffee that had seen better mornings. Neither of them looked old enough to remember a time when smartphones weren't standard issue, much less when military IDs looked different than the plastic rectangles used today. "Morning, ma'am," Mendoza said without much enthusiasm. He gave Avery a cursory glance, his eyes sliding over her faded clothes and silver hair, dismissing her as just another dependent or a retiree's wife coming to pick up paperwork. Avery didn't speak. She simply slid the ID across the laminated countertop. It was old, really old. It was a laminated common access card that looked like it had been issued sometime in the previous century. The photograph showed a much younger Avery. In the picture, her hair was regulation short, her eyes were stone cold, and she wore the kind of expression that suggested she had never smiled for a camera in her life. The card had no visible expiration date, no chip, just a red authorization bar and a QR strip encoded with information that existed in databases most people didn't know existed. Mendoza raised an eyebrow and let out a low whistle. "Whoa, that is vintage." His partner Kinley leaned over for a closer look and actually laughed out loud. "What is this, like Phase 1 clearance from the Stone Age?" Avery didn't respond. She just stood there with that particular kind of stillness. It wasn't the stillness of fear, it was the stillness of a predator waiting for the wind to change. She had waited through worse conversations than this one. She had waited in rice paddies and deserts and frozen mountain passes. She could wait for 2 privates to finish their joke. "Seriously though," Kinley added, grinning like he had discovered something amusing, "did you print this off the internet? This thing belongs in the Smithsonian, not a secure facility." Mendoza gave his own chuckle, the kind that said he was enjoying himself more than his job usually allowed.
Alright, let's see if this bad boy even works anymore. He picked up the card with 2 fingers, holding it by the very corner as if it might be contagious. He waved it under the scanner with exaggerated ceremony, performing for his friend. A red light flashed once. Then again. The screen blinked. Unrecognized format. Please retry. Uh-huh, Mendoza said, glancing over his shoulder at his partner with a satisfied smirk. Called it. System doesn't even know what to do with this thing. He slid the card back toward Avery with the casual dismissiveness of someone who had proven his point. Ma'am, unless that card has got some kind of magic powers, it's not getting you past this desk. You're gonna need something from this century to get into the medical wing. Kinley's grin widened as he took another sip of his coffee. Maybe it's one of those ghost program cards, Operation Classified Grandma or something. Avery remained absolutely motionless. Her eyes weren't on the 2 soldiers making jokes at her expense. They were fixed on the scanner screen, watching something the guards hadn't noticed yet. A small amber light above the terminal, usually dark, had started blinking. Mendoza sighed, annoyed that she hadn't left yet. He grabbed the card again. Look, I'll try it one more time, but then you have to move along. He swiped it slower this time. Maybe if I wave it around 3 times and chant please work, it'll click. The scanner made a different sound this time. It wasn't the electronic beep they were used to. It was a hard mechanical snap, followed by a soft digital hum that seemed to come from somewhere deeper in the system, vibrating the desk itself. The screen went black. Not sleep mode black, but dead black.
For a moment that stretched longer than it should have, nothing happened. Then, something new appeared. A gold circle materialized in the center of the dark screen. Inside the circle was a downward-pointing black triangle that began to rotate, slowly at first, hypnotically. Around its edge, encrypted symbols pulsed in a pattern that neither guard recognized. The triangle spun once, twice, picking up speed until it became a blur of motion that somehow remained perfectly clear. Then, a line of red text appeared beneath the emblem, in bold capital letters that seemed to burn themselves into the pixels. Alpha, Alpha. Red zone authorized. Identity detected. The scanner beeped twice, sharp, urgent, piercing. Then, the entire terminal locked up with a finality that sounded like a vault door closing. Kinley stopped mid-sip, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Mendoza's fingers went rigid an inch from the keyboard, like he'd suddenly realized he might be touching something that could bite back. Avery looked up slowly, meeting their eyes with the same calm expression she'd worn since walking through the door. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the sudden silence. Looks like the card worked. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. The only sound was the low mechanical hum coming from the scanner and the distant whisper of air conditioning through overhead vents. The emblem on the screen continued its steady rotation, not animated like a computer graphic, but alive, pulsing in a way that made both soldiers instinctively step back from the terminal. The triangle spun clockwise once more. Then the screen flashed red with new text. Security lock engaged. Restricted authorization detected. Notify command authority. Protocol Alpha 5. Behind the desk, the terminal made a low warbling tone that neither Mendoza nor Kinley had ever heard before. Down the hallway, a small amber light began blinking beside what looked like a fire suppression panel. Then another light joined it. Then another. Mendoza's hand hovered over the keyboard, shaking. That's not normal. No kidding, Kinley muttered, staring at the screen like it might suddenly explode and take half the building with it. From somewhere overhead, a speaker crackled to life. The voice was tense, sharp, and all business. Checkpoint 1, this is security command. Lock that station down immediately. Step away from the terminal. That is not a standard clearance verification. Kinley looked like Mendoza with the expression of someone who had just realized he might have accidentally triggered something far beyond his pay grade. Did we just break something important? Avery hadn't moved from her position in front of the counter. She stood exactly as she had before, perfectly still, perfectly calm. She looked like she had been through situations like this before and knew exactly how they played out. She looked like she had spent time in rooms where chaos was just another part of the job. Wait, Kinley whispered, his eyes darting across the information displayed on the locked screen. This says Alpha 5. That can't be right. That's way above base level authorization. That's Pentagon level. Mendoza's fingers trembled as he backed away from the terminal. We messed up, man. We really messed up. Kinley set down his coffee cup with hands that weren't quite steady anymore. What does red zone authorized even mean? Avery spoke again. Her tone was unchanged, quiet, matter of fact, cutting through the tension in the air like it was nothing more than morning fog. It means I'm not here by accident. Down the hallway, heavy security doors began closing automatically with hydraulic hisses that echoed off the polished floors. A group of VA staff near the vending machine stopped their conversation mid-sentence as radios clipped to their belts came alive with low chatter and encrypted codes. The air in the lobby had changed. What had been just another sleepy federal building processing routine morning business had snapped into something else entirely. Alert protocol. Lockdown. Personnel were moving with the kind of purpose that said they had been trained for situations they hoped never to encounter. But the strangest thing wasn't the lockdown or the flashing lights. It was that nobody seemed to know why it was happening. The guard monitoring security feeds from behind reinforced glass looked rattled. He picked up a red phone on the wall, keying into a secure channel. Command, I need senior authority on the line right now.
We just had an alpha-level authorization activate. It's not a drill, it's not legacy, it is live inside the reception area. Kinley looked like he was about to be sick. His face had gone pale, and he kept glancing between the locked terminal and the older woman in the faded jeans. "Ma'am," he said hesitantly, his voice smaller than it had been 5 minutes earlier. "I think there might have been some kind of system error, maybe a glitch or something." "No," Avery said calmly. "There wasn't." The wall monitor that had been cycling through facility maps and general announcements blinked once and went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a slightly different shade, making the morning feel later than it was. From behind a side door marked authorized personnel only, a stocky man in a security forces vest emerged at something between a fast walk and a run. Sergeant First Class Delaney was the VA liaison for facility security. He had the look of someone who had been active duty once but now trusted procedures and paperwork more than instinct. He took one look at the frozen terminal, the rotating emblem still glowing on the screen, and his expression went from routine irritation to something much more serious. "All right," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "What the hell happened here?" Mendoza straightened up like someone had run electricity through his spine. "Sir, she handed us this old card and we thought it was fake, so we scanned it just to show her it wouldn't work, but then it triggered something we've never seen before." Delaney held up one hand, cutting him off. He looked at Avery. "Ma'am," he said slowly, choosing his words with care, "I'm going to need you to remain here while we verify your credentials through proper channels." Avery met his eyes. "I've been verified." "Right. Well, I still need to run this through the chain of command." "Looks like it already went through the chain," Avery said quietly. "You're just catching up." The comment landed with weight. Behind him, Kinley leaned toward Mendoza and whispered urgently, "You think she's CIA? Like really CIA?" Mendoza's mouth felt dry as dust. "I think we just tried to bounce someone who doesn't bounce." The intercom crackled again. "Alpha 5 clearance confirmed. Active. Dispatching command-level personnel from the administrative annex. Subject to be held with full courtesy protocols. Do not detain. Repeat, do not detain." Delaney went pale. "Courtesy protocols?" Kinley frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Delaney said, tugging at his collar nervously, "that whoever she is, she outranks every person in this building, and we just spent the last 10 minutes treating her like a joke." 2 military police officers appeared in the doorway, a man and a woman, both in crisp uniforms. Their eyes swept the room until they found Avery. When they saw the emblem on the screen, their posture shifted. They didn't reach for weapons. They didn't take a defensive stance. The male MP stepped forward with the kind of respectful bearing usually reserved for generals. "Ma'am, we are here to escort you to interim command processing for verification and liaison protocol." He wasn't asking, but he wasn't ordering either. Avery gave the faintest nod and moved toward them without hesitation. Kinley stared like she had just levitated. The MPs didn't handcuff her. They didn't touch her arm. They simply walked on either side of her, forming a protective phalanx as she moved toward the corridor. As they passed, Mendoza stepped back, terrified. "Get me her file," Delaney muttered to nobody in particular as they disappeared around the corner. The guard behind the glass spoke up. "She's above the book, sir." Avery didn't look back once.
The command wing on the second floor was usually reserved for boring administrative meetings, but this morning it was buzzing. Avery sat alone in a glass-walled conference room. Her hands rested calmly on the polished table. The door remained open, yet nobody stepped inside. The emblem was still cycling on the room's display panel. The stairwell door banged open. Colonel Tessa McBride didn't walk into the command wing. She took control of it. Steel gray hair, flight jacket, silver oak leaves on her shoulders. She moved without an aide, without a clipboard, just authority in motion. "Who triggered Flag Protocol Alpha 5? She asked, her voice loud enough to carry down the hall. "And why wasn't I notified the instant it happened?" Nobody answered immediately. Colonel McBride turned into the conference room and faced Avery directly. "Miss Cross." Avery inclined her head. "Colonel, you always did know how to make an entrance." "I prefer to think of it as knowing how to get people's attention." McBride allowed the faintest hint of a smile. She turned to address the cluster of confused personnel gathering in the hallway, including Mendoza and Kinley, who had been summoned upstairs. "Let me clear something up," she said, her voice steel. "What you are looking at is not a malfunction. It is not a spoofed credential. It is not a joke." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a black folder with red classification borders. "This," she said, holding up a document, "is an operations archive from a program none of you have ever heard of, because none of you were ever cleared to know it existed." She turned the page. "Echo 0. Authorization level, classified above your pay grade. 6 individuals in the entire United States military were ever issued this designation. 4 are dead. 1 is missing. The 6th is sitting in that chair." She looked directly at Mendoza and Kinley. "And you laughed at her." The silence was suffocating. "Effective immediately," McBride continued, "these 2 individuals are reassigned to facilities maintenance for remedial training. Report to the custodial supervisor at 0600 hours tomorrow." She folded the document. "Everyone else, return to your duties. What happened here is classified." She gestured toward Avery. "Walk with me." Avery stood and followed the colonel out. The hallway parted for them like the Red Sea. "We kept the access active," McBride said softly as they walked down the corridor, away from the prying eyes. "Wasn't sure if you'd ever need it again." "Didn't think I would," Avery replied. "But I knew it was there."
You remember Hammond? McBride asked, pointing to a portrait on the wall. He's the one who argued against deleting your access, said some clearances should never expire. They reached a window overlooking the parking lot. The sun was high now. Those boys back there, McBride said. They aren't bad soldiers, just young. They haven't learned yet that respect isn't something you withhold until someone proves they deserve it. They'll learn, Avery said, or they won't last. You carrying much weight these days, Avery? Avery looked at her reflection in the glass. Weight doesn't go anywhere, Tessa. You just get stronger at carrying it. That's what I figured. They reached the side exit. No ceremony, no salutes. Just two professionals acknowledging the life they had lived. Take care of yourself, Avery. Always do. Avery stepped out into the heat. She walked to her truck, the engine starting with a familiar rumble. As she drove past the main entrance, she saw Mendoza and Kinley. They were holding mobs, standing by a bucket, looking utterly defeated. Kinley looked up. Their eyes met through the windshield. He raised a hand, a small, apologetic wave. Avery didn't slow down, but she nodded, just once. Acknowledgement. Lesson delivered. As she drove onto the highway, the facility settled back into its routine. But something had shifted. A reminder had been delivered. A reminder that you never, ever know who you are talking to. And up in the command center, a young staffer asked Colonel McBride what to put in the official report. What about the woman with the Alpha 5 clearance? McBride looked at the empty road. I don't know what you're talking about. Alpha 5 clearances don't exist. Avery Cross drove home, windows down, radio playing soft. She carried the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows that dignity isn't something you beg for. It's something you possess, until you choose to give it away. We live in a world that loves to judge by appearances. We look at the faded clothes, the gray hair, the limp, and we assume weakness. But often, the most powerful warriors are the ones who have nothing left to prove. Have you ever seen someone get underestimated, only for the truth to come out in a single, earth-shattering moment? Or maybe you've been that person, judged before you could even speak. If this story reminded you that respect should be given freely to everyone, because you never know what battles they've fought, do me a favor, hit that like button. It helps us share these stories with more people. And if you haven't already, click subscribe and ring that bell. We tell stories about the quiet heroes, the ones who don't wear capes, but who carry the weight of the world in silence. I'm your name. Thank you for listening. And until next time, watch who you laugh at. You never know who holds the keys to the kingdom.